Hello, I hope you're having a good day. As the title would suggest, I will be talking about all the books that I read in May. The first book I read in May is Swing Time by Zadie Smith. I enjoyed this book and I'm so glad I did. The first book I read of Zadie Smith's was White Teeth and I loved it so much. It was one of my top books from last year. But since then I've tried to read some of her other books and I've never been able to finish them. Something about them just hasn't quite clicked and I haven't found myself being interested in either the plot or the characters, which is such a shame. So I was so glad to find another one of her books that I could finally enjoy. Swing Time is from the point of view of an unnamed protagonist, and I didn't realize she was unnamed until I read a review saying that she was, and that just totally freaked me out because somehow she was so clear in my head that I just assumed that she had a name. The plot kind of moves back and forth between her childhood, especially talking about her parents and her best friend growing up, and then the later part of the book is when she's working for this famous pop star and the pop star decides to do aid work in Africa. And so there's this sort of interesting discussion of the main character having her ancestry from Africa. I just really enjoyed reading along with this book. It had some interesting ideas and really strong characters. I was a little, I guess, disappointed by the end. I'm not sure if I was expecting anything different from the end or it just felt a little bit flat and a little bit anticlimactic after the whole sort of effort of reading this huge massive book. Over May I went to Sydney and Melbourne, so with me, because they're really thin, I took a couple of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books. I have the whole series now and I was intending on reading all of them and doing a special video on them for Tau Day, which is an international day celebrating the works of Douglas Adams. But unfortunately I didn't enjoy these as much as I remembered enjoying them. I've read the first two books fairly recently, but I haven't read the whole series since I was a teenager, and I enjoyed the first two. The rest of them I found the plot just a bit too obscure, and I found that the sort of wittiness of Douglas Adams' writing didn't keep me interested. Mostly I just didn't find them very funny. So I read the first four and I didn't get around to reading the last one because I just kind of got bored, so that was kind of sad. I still love the first two books and I still think the TV show is great, and I do wonder whether these books might be better in their radio adaptation form, as the radio serials were dramatized and with the comedic timing of the actors doing the performances, they'd probably be a lot funnier. The next book I read was The Easter Parade by Richard Yates. I read Revolutionary Road a couple of years ago and absolutely loved it. I thought Richard Yates' writing style was incredible, and so I'd been quite keen to read more of his books. Unfortunately, this didn't quite live up to Revolutionary Road. I still enjoyed this though. This is about two sisters, Sarah and Emily, told from the point of view of Emily. Sarah, the older one, gets married and has kids and lives a sort of more traditional life, whereas Emily has a career and has lots of different lovers. So the book kind of compares and contrasts both those decisions that each woman has made and sort of comes to the conclusion that neither of them is great and that the world is always going to be pretty bad. It's definitely a very sad book. Like, it doesn't have a sort of positive outlook on life or human beings in general at all, but the writing itself is so engrossing. I do always find it fascinating to read about other times, and this book starts off in the 1930s when they're children and continues into the 70s when Emily is an old lady, and so it gives an interesting sort of overview of America and New York during that era. The last book I read in May was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. So I read this book because it was May's Banging Book Club book, and the Banging Book Club loved this book. Their discussion on their podcast gave it rave reviews. I unfortunately didn't share those feelings about this book. I found it a little bit tedious, unfortunately. I think partly that is because it's very dialogue heavy and I found the dialogue not to be particularly realistic. I found the main character Ari a little bit hard to believe in, apart from obsessing about his brother and Dante and his family. He didn't seem to have any interests. I know not everyone needs to have like a stock standard hobby and that kind of thing, but I just found it very hard to understand who he was. I found Dante a much more interesting and believable character, and I think the bits where Dante and Ari are talking together or just interacting together were the most interesting and believable bits of the book. It's quite a thick book and I found it a little bit repetitive. I felt like Ari kept going over and over again the same things about his brother and about his father and about Dante, and I felt I really wanted it to move on faster, and I really loved the end, so I kind of wish the end had been the middle and that we'd got to see what happens after the end in the last half of the book. But I understand that that's not the book that the author was writing, and I know this book has a huge fan base, and it's won heaps of awards as well, so it's just not the book for me, I think. That was all the books I read in May. Please let me know your thoughts on any of them if you've read them, and I will see you next time. Bye!